Welcome to part 7 of this Python course, which deals with string formatting in Python. So far for strings, every time I've wanted to create a string, I've used a comma to display a string and a value, or to join values together. But in Python, there's something else we use, which is called a placeholder. So in Python, a placeholder, which is a pair of braces, is used to insert data into a string. Now, what is important about using this placeholder? Well, quite simply, this data, or I'm going to say the data inside the placeholder, can then be formatted. Let's have a look at how we can actually do this. If I start off and I'll say print, and I'm going to give it some placeholders. There's the first one, second one, and third one. And outside of that string, I'm going to say dot format. We can now pass it data inside a tuple. See, we are working with a tuple now. We've got parentheses. We've opened and closed our parentheses. So this is anything we place inside here is data belonging to a tuple. So if I create some values, 1, 2, and let's go for 3. If I run that, it comes back and says, no problem, 1, 2, and 3. So what it's done is it's replaced the data from the tuple and it's put it into these placeholders. The first placeholder will get the first value. The second placeholder will get the second value, and the third placeholder will get the third value from that tuple. We can also, however, specify index numbers. So if I take that line and I say, no, I want the first value to be displayed will be value 1 from the tuple, and then I want index number 2, and then I want index number 0. We haven't changed the tuple at all. I'm telling Python to extract data from different positions in the tuple. So these are now specifying index numbers. And if I run that, it now comes back and says, right, 2, 3, 1. We can also, let's do this, other values can also be displayed using placeholders. So let's create a list. I'm going to call it LST squares of values. So list, I'm going to create a list now. I'm going to call it X for X in range. Let's go for all values from 1 to 6. I can also create a dictionary. If I say dic cubes equals, we have to create a dictionary consists of a key and a value. So I'm going to say X and X cubed. For X in range, I'm going to use the same range of 1 to 6. So that will create a list called LST squares and a dictionary called dic cubes. And I can then display them. I can say print squares equals a placeholder. New line cubes equals another placeholder. And then outside of the inverted commas, I'll say dot format, open my tuple, and I can tell it what values to use from the tuple. First value will be LST squares, which is a list. The second value is going to be a dictionary called dic cubes. So if I run that, it comes back and tells me that squares equals, and then inside that placeholder, it replaces it with the list called LST squares, which I created. It then goes to a new line, and then it prints out cubes equals, and then we have another placeholder. And in this placeholder, it takes the complete dictionary and puts it into the placeholder. So we see the dictionary displayed there of all the cubes from 1 to 6, or 1 to 5, because 6 is not included. So these placeholders can be used to display any type of data you want. You can display single values, you can display strings, you can display lists, you can display dictionaries. It does not matter. To Python, any type of value can be displayed using a placeholder. Now, one of the important things about placeholders is that not only can we use it to display things, but we can also use it to format text. Let's have a look at how we can go through some text formatting using these placeholders. If I create a string, and that string is Python rocks, I can then tell Python to print out that using a placeholder. If I say print placeholder dot format s, it's going to simply print Python rocks. Okay, so nothing strange about that, because quite frankly, we could have quite easily just said the same thing. It would have been print s, would have given us exactly the same result. But now, let's have a look at some important formatting features. If I now say print, I'm going to put the placeholder in there, format s, but now inside the placeholder, I'm going to tell it to start off with a colon, which means start formatting. And I now use a greater than sign, and let's just choose a value of 20. What I'm doing here is choosing right alignment. Alignment. So the greater than sign tells Python to right align the text. I'm telling it to use 20 characters. So it's going to display a string of 20 characters with that string aligned on the right. So if I print it out now, you can see that there's a whole lot of spaces on the left-hand side. So from the start to the finish, we have 20 characters. And the string Python rocks is added to the end of the alignment string. Right, so the greater than sign simply means right alignment. The less than sign would then be left alignment, exactly the same. We can also have center alignment. Let's try that. Print center alignment is that symbol, and again I'm going to use 20 characters, format s, and we can see now that we have a string consisting of 20 characters. So there's the start, there's the end of the string, and the words Python rocks appears in the middle or the center of those 20 characters. So that is very useful for aligning text in a column. We can also add in something called a padding character. So I'm going to print out exactly the previous string. I'm going to say print dot format s, but this time that will print out exactly what we've got here. But if we add in a character in front of the center align character, let's add in a star, for example, it will now come and print out 3 characters in the front and 4 characters at the end, and the Python rocks will be center aligned in that string. So there is the complete string consisting of 20 characters. So there we've got our 20 characters, and we are telling it to use a padding character. The padding character, you can use anything you like. Doesn't have to be a star. So for example, you could use an underscore, for example, and it would still display it with underscores. The final example is how we can truncate characters in a string. So if I say print, same structure, colon, this time I'm going to say dot 6. And I run that, we can see now the dot 6 tells us to only take the first 6 characters from that string. So although the whole string is, Python rocks with an exclamation, the first 6 characters are simply the words Python, and that's what it displays. So we can truncate characters in any string simply by using that dot, and then the number of characters you want, the number of characters you want to take out, which will be the 6. Finally, we can also format numbers. So let's start off. I'm going to say A equals 15, while A is greater than or equal to 5. Let's print out some values. I'm going to say print format. I'm going to use A in there, and then I'm going to reduce the value of A minus equals 1. So each time I'm going to reduce the value of A. So if I run that, we end up with A starting at 15, and each time it runs through here, it's printing out the value of A. There it is there. And then it reduces A by 1, and it runs around until A gets less than 5. So it prints out all the values from 15 to 5. But you'll notice that these values start off with 2 characters, 1 and a 5, 1, 4, 1, 3, and then eventually it drops down to a single character, 9, 8, and so on. So they are not aligned properly. They are aligned on the left instead of on the right. Now we can actually change that by using formatting. So if I tell it to display those values always using 2 characters, I'm going to say, if there are 2 characters, I want you to display both characters. If there's only a single character, I want you to add a 0 to the beginning of it. And if I run that now, we end up with the same values being displayed, but you can see now they are all lined up using 2 characters. And this is quite useful for lining text up into columns. All right, let's do another example. I'm going to create a constant. I'm going to call it pi. And I'm going to give it a value 3,14159 should be 7. And I'm going to now print some values. If I say print, now let's have a look. Format pi, end up with 3,1415927, exactly the value that pi is. Now, strictly speaking, this value is a float. So what you should do is that if you want to display a float, you need to tell Python that it is a float. So if I do this, colon F, now the F stands for float. So what Python now does, it says, all right, well, now this is not a string, it is a float. So it automatically rounds that off to 6 decimal places. So if I run that now, we can see that the value of pi is 3,141593. It's taken the 27 and rounded it off to a 3. So it displays it with 3 decimal places. Just like we had with strings, we can also display a certain number of decimal places by using the dot and then the number of places we want. So if inside the placeholder, if I say a dot and then a 3, it's going to display 3 decimal places only, and then the F still tells it we're working with a floating point value. If I go like that, it now comes back and rounds off pi to 3 decimal places only. So the dot 3 inside the placeholder rounds it off to 3 decimal places. Finally, we can also use placeholders simply to display a string. If I want to create a string, I'm going to call it string. I can say that that string is the following. Value of pi equals, and then I can use a placeholder. Let's go to 4 decimal places just to be different. Dot format pi. When I run that, it is creating a string, and you can create a most complicated string you want using these placeholders, as long as you've got the placeholders in the correct place. So if I run that code, a string has now been created called string1. And at any later time in your program, we can now print out string1, and it will print out the string. The value of pi equals 3,1416, which is exactly what we created there as the string. The value. I hope you enjoyed this introduction to string formatting. For more information, you're welcome to see the book listed in the description below.